your phone. And all of you will get the recording, so you'll have it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, everybody, it's 7:32. We're 2 minutes late, and we are going to get started. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And today shows we're on a Zoom that we all love justice. I have to get credit for that slogan to Diana Conway. I would have not thought about that. Okay, a quick note about next month, March 14th, we are going to have all 4 county executive candidates. In April, we are going to have the 2 sheriff candidates. And in June, we are going to have the judge candidates. And I'm also hopeful that soon we can return to the Tasty Diner. Today, as I noted to all of you in the introduction, we are going to have a 90-minute session, the first time that we've done that, with 4 candidates. The time is going to fly by. And we are going to stick to the timeframes that we talk about at 15 seconds. Sheldon Fishman is going to ring a bell, and when those 15 seconds are up, the person speaking is going to be muted. I hate to be rude, but we have a lot of questions, and for the people who are listening, I want you to hear the most information as possible from all of our candidates. We are going to start with 2-minute introductions. And I am going to put my timer on so that I know where we are. We are going to do this alphabetically. Tom DeGonia is first. Tom DeGonia and his family have lived in Montgomery County for almost 30 years. He was an assistant state's attorney for 8 years, and for the last 4 years led a 4 years at the state's attorney's office. He led a felony prosecution team, and he was the first male prosecutor to handle the domestic violence docket. As a private attorney, he served as appointed special prosecutor in Prince George's of the Bar Association of Montgomery. Are you there?
I'm here, Susan, but you're breaking up.
That's okay, because I cut myself off.
Okay. Can I go ahead and go? I didn't. Okay, great. Thank you, Susan. Hopefully it's not just me who is having that issue. But good morning, everyone. Welcome to the District 18 Breakfast Club. One day soon we'll be back in person, and we'll be having breakfast down in Silver Spring. I first want to thank Susan and Michael and Sheldon for running this and putting on this important forum. I'm happy to be here. Part of what Susan had said was, really my career has been as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney. I was with the federal government and the State Department before coming to Montgomery County, where I was a prosecutor and ended up leading one of the felony prosecution teams there. And while as a prosecutor, I had the privilege to come back as a special prosecutor, serving as a special prosecutor in Prince George's County for one of the largest child sex abuse exploitation cases that county ever saw, and as a special prosecutor on the Eastern Shore, prosecuting another prosecutor who was abusing his authority out there. So I look forward to coming back to public service here in Montgomery County. In a way, I never really left. I ran the Family Justice Center Foundation for 12 years as the president, serving thousands of citizens here in Montgomery County, and had the great fortune to be elected by my peers in the Montgomery County Bar to lead the Bar Association. So I look forward to our discussion and questions today.
Okay, next we have John McCarthy. John McCarthy, a 50-year resident of Montgomery County, has lived in Tacoma Park, Wheaton, White Oak, Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Germantown. He is a man of the county. He is a father of 4 and has coached youth sports for 35 years. He has taught for 43 years at places like Montgomery College, Johns Hopkins, and the U.S. Justice Department. John was a public defender when he first arrived in Montgomery County and was elected state's attorney in 2006. John was the first state's attorney in Maryland to decriminalize marijuana, and during his tenure, the Mental Health Court was founded. John?
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone who are involved in hosting today's procedure. Look, during the 50 years that I've lived here, my connection to I know where this breakfast club meets because I've probably been there 6 times as a featured speaker over the years that I've been state's attorney. I began my life here in Montgomery County, living at Tacoma Park at 7333 New Hampshire Avenue, where a double homicide occurred behind that building, and I'm handling that case as a prosecution. In terms of experience, in terms of handling criminal matters, I don't think that there's any lawyer in Montgomery County that has ever tried more major cases than I have. I would say to you that I've also moved to White Oak. I live 2 doors down from the White Oak Library, again, which serves this particular district. And I coached youth sports in the county for 35 years. One of the great, great achievements of my life is being named to the Coaching Hall of Fame for youth sports in Montgomery County for my role in working with young people in the community. I've also been an educator. I've taught at Montgomery College since 1979. I began at Tacoma Park. 43 years I've been teaching. I teach tonight. I have class tonight in Rockville. I've also taught, I've taught overseas for the United States government on rule of law issues. I've taught for the United States Congress and Open World in various countries, including the Ukraine and Russia. I have class tonight. I've also met challenges. All of us have challenges in life, but a few years back, I was struck with cancer. I've survived 6 cancer surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation. I am completely cured based on the benefits of living in Washington, D.C. and the magic of the doctors from Johns Hopkins. But during the time, since I've been state's attorney, the one thing that I think is the measure of my time as state's attorney is through my experience, I believe that we've been the most innovative office in the entire state. I personally got the mental health court started here in Montgomery County. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge in the court system in Montgomery County, that we did not have that. I got it done. With experience, you know how to get things done. Whether it's the mental health court, the truancy court program, the program that we run for opiate awareness here in the community to try to keep young people away from opiate deaths. We have a huge challenge here in Montgomery County. We've already talked to over 75,000 young people in our community through that one program alone. When I stopped the prosecution as the first prosecutor in 2005, stopped prosecuting marijuana, I knew about the racial disparity in terms of the implementation of marijuana laws, and I addressed it. Whether it's independent investigation of police use of force cases, they started here. The state model that got passed last year was based on a model that began between myself and Howard County. We led the way years before everybody else. I'm honored to be here. I hope I get an opportunity to explain some of the other things that we've done as we continue to innovate. It's an ongoing, continuing thing that we've been doing here. It's never stopped, and I look forward to continuing sort of a career innovation in the state's attorney's office. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I've turned my camera off because it'll hopefully help my sound. Next is Bernice Miracu North. Bernice is a mother, wife, and daughter of immigrants who graduated from Montgomery County schools and is a courtroom lawyer and community activist. She served as a co-chair of the Montgomery County Reimagining Public Safety Task Force this past year. After clerking for a judge in Maryland and one in DC, Bernice served as a line prosecutor representing the state of Maryland in Anne Arundel County before going private practice. Bernice is the managing attorney of the North Law Group LLC in Silver Spring, practicing defense and adult guardianship cases. Bernice, 2 minutes.
Good morning to the District 18 Democratic Club, and thank you for the leadership team for having us on this morning. The reason why we're all here is that justice is on the ballot this election. What we're seeing here in Montgomery County is two visions of justice, what the community is looking for and the status quo. In my personal experience, I've definitely had my hardships. I've survived witnessing gun violence. I have, as a woman, seeing my friends deal with domestic violence cases. These two experiences are very unique for me to provide a new prescription on how we are dealing with justice. We need a new lens on how justice looks in Montgomery County, especially as diverse as it's been, especially in the last 15, 16 years. I'm looking for an opportunity to serve this county as the next state's attorney to provide a justice system that focuses on even seeking greater transparency and accountability. A system that focuses on alternatives to incarceration, not just when jail is the only option on the table, but whether we should even file charges at all. I'm looking for a justice system that focuses on fairness and equity, not just when it's convenient or election season, but continuously thinking about these issues based upon one's personal experience and one's empathy towards the diversity of our county. I'm looking for a justice system that focuses on restoring communities and stabilizing communities. And that includes providing more resources for victim witness advocates so they can be able to provide the services for our diverse population in Montgomery County in an efficient way. And that involves creating more restorative justice programs, especially for our youth. We have a crisis with our youth right now in Montgomery County. As much resources as we spend on it, there should be no excuse that there's disproportionate impact on Black and Brown kids in Montgomery County and our juvenile justice system. We need to find a different way. We need a different vision. And I know I can provide the vision for Montgomery County. Thank you.
Okay, next is Perry Paler. Perry Paler, a native of Montgomery County, has more than 25 years of experience as a former line prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Perry is a current deputy state's attorney in Prince George's County, where he oversees the guns and drugs unit. Prior to returning to the prosecutor's office, Perry spent 15 years in private practice concentrating on criminal defense and economic development. He has served on the Montgomery County Commission on Juvenile Justice and the Montgomery County Charter Review Commission. He sings in his church choir and is active in his chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. Perry, 2 minutes.
Unmute, please, Barry.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to the District 18 Breakfast Club. I appreciate the opportunity to share my vision for justice here in Montgomery County. I just want to say a little bit about myself. I was raised here in Montgomery County. My parents moved here in 1974. Today, I live about a half a mile from where I was raised. I'm married with 2 children. Both of my kids, one son graduated from Paint Branch. My daughter is a senior at Blake High School. I do sing in the choir at Kingdom Fellowship AME Church. And as stated, I'm a member of the Montgomery County Charter Review Commission. And I also serve on a great foundation in Montgomery College, Germantown campus, where we recruit STEM companies, STEM programs to develop on the campus to create jobs and opportunities for a recent graduate. As stated, I've been an attorney for 25 years. I was in private practice for 15 years. Now I serve as deputy state's attorney, where I'm part of a leadership team that oversees approximately 170 full-time equivalents, and we manage a budget of approximately $19 million. On any given day, I'm responsible for over 1,000 criminal cases. This displays I have the breadth of experience to step in as your state's attorney on day one. I'm running to be the state's attorney for one reason. I want to implement both safety and justice here in Montgomery County. This became even more evident to me that I had to run during the summer of 2020. We know what was going on with George Floyd, and at the same time, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. Personally, I found myself in need of a life-saving organ. I was on dialysis, and my wife tested, and she became a match. And I was lucky. I was lucky to receive a kidney transplant, and that was my second chance at life. And then it dawned on me that everyone deserves a second chance. And sadly, we know that that's not always the case here in Montgomery County, particularly at the rate our young Black and Brown youth are charged as adults. And the more I thought about it, the more I reviewed things. And I want to be candid, I'm quite comfortable being the deputy. So the question for me wasn't whether I could run or not, or whether I should run. It was how could I not run? So I started to reflect on the quote from Dr. King. And what Dr. King said is the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who remain neutral during times of moral crisis. Friends, we are in a moral crisis here in Montgomery County, particularly as it relates to our criminal justice system and specifically how our youth are treated under this current administration. Based on that, upon conferring with my wife, I made the decision to run for Montgomery County State's Attorney, and I'm gonna be candid, it's the best decision I've ever made for my life. Thank you, and I look forward to our conversation this morning.
Okay, Sheldon, did you ring the bell?
I did. Did people not hear it?
No.
No, you got to ring it louder.
You hear it
Can't
now?
hear? Yes. Okay, we are now going.
And my I messed up the when the first two speakers. I'm sorry, my timer was off, but I'm also.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it was off.
Nobody went.
Yeah,
it
your
was-
card,
it was
Sheldon,
off.
so I don't know if you're off, if you're
No,
off
we
camera,
did-
because
We did not go over, I was watching my clock. Okay, question number 1, 2 minutes, everybody. We're gonna do order number 3, so Perry will start. After the shooting at Magruder High School, many questions were raised for this forum. So here is the question. What are your plans to address the proliferation of ghost guns, reduce gun violence in general, and should school resource officers be returned to county schools?
Okay, I want to start out with ghost guns. And I did have the opportunity just last week, I testified before the state judiciary regarding ghost guns and House Bill 425. Couple of things. One of the big things is serialization. They're called ghost guns. They're actually, the formal title is privately made firearms. And the reason they're labeled ghost guns because they don't have serial numbers, so they cannot be traced. So the first law that went down in session this year regarding ghost guns is HB 425, which is in support of having these ghost guns serialized, both by the manufacturer and by privately owned citizens. I'm in favor of serialization, and I testified before the Maryland General Assembly to that fact. Regarding proliferation of guns, I also manage the Guns and Drugs Unit. As I serve as deputy, we have to work with our law enforcement partners and understand the trail and track where they're coming from. We know the guns are coming from south to north. So we have to have aggressive traffic enforcement. We have to have aggressive prosecution of illegal guns here in Maryland. In terms of schools, the police and the Board of Education, they'll make the appropriate decision regarding SROs. I'm more in favor of dialogue. What I've found regarding this issue is there's a lot of isolation. And regarding some folks don't want SROs, some folks want SROs. But what's more important is that our parents, the students, and the faculty, that their voices are heard. It's up to the educators and law enforcement to come together and have the tough conversation. And I'm in favor of continued dialogue. And most importantly to me is safety of our students. If the SROs are ultimately removed, then it's incumbent upon the leaders to give us and provide with a substitute that provides safety for our students. So I'm really in favor of dialogue. Isolation is what's
you're muted, Perry. You're
Nope,
muted.
that was
Perry.
time.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, next person.
Hey, Susan, just for the record, I didn't hear a bell. So I was supposed to get that 15-second bell, and I didn't hear that. That's all.
Sheldon, we are not, you have to do it louder, Sheldon, okay?
Can you hear it
Okay.
now?
Yes.
Eric,
Okay.
can you hear it?
Yes, Tom DeGonia.
Great, thank you. Ghost guns are not a new problem. Ghost guns have been around for the last 3 to 4 years in the legislature. Delegate Lopez and Senator Lee proposed and supported legislation by Attorney General Frosch to ban ghost guns. That's long overdue. And unfortunately, right down the road from me at Magruder High School, we had a shooting with a young man who brought a ghost gun, or a PMF, personally manufactured gun, to the school. And if you look at the research, and I've been talking to ATF people, the fundamental things of how you combat not just ghost guns, but firearms in general is through partnership, intelligence, and enforcement. And what has been lacking in Montgomery County is that partnership. We haven't had a unified approach to combating either ghost guns or firearms in general. We've seen a large spike. Prince George's County last year had 264 untraceable guns involved, 13 of those in homicides. Montgomery County in 2019, we had 16 ghost guns seized. In 2020, we had 56. And last year, there were over 70 ghost guns seized, and at least 5 this year that were taken from school, or firearms that were taken from schools. What we have to do, and what I'm going to do, is impose what I'm going to call a firearm safety task force. You're going to have a prosecutor who is trained and is, if necessary, is going to be cross-designated with federal authorities as an assistant U.S. attorney to work collaboratively with all of our law enforcement, our sheriff's office, Montgomery County Police, state police, and the ATF. And we're going to use the practices that we've already developed in other crimes. We're going to intercept and intercede. We've used those things. We can do online stings in child pornography cases. We're going to use those things. I see Sheldon waving his arm. So it's FAST, Firearm Safety Task Force, a coordinated effort led by a state's attorney in coordination with our partners. As it relates to SROs, this is a big question.
Okay, next.
Susan, apparently the bell doesn't, you didn't hear the bell, right?
No.
I'm
No,
sorry.
it's John, you're next.
Okay, listen, let me say, I was at Magruder High School that day. I was at the press conference that announced the effort this year to ban ghost guns. I think in terms of a safety issue in the legislature this year, there is no more pronounced need than as for us to ban ghost guns. I'm testifying on Wednesday in the Senate on this particular bill. I wrote letters in support of
Hello.
last year.
Susan, hi, it's Steve and John. We're trying to link in, but we don't have the link.
Do you have the invitation?
Yes.
Okay, go to that and click onto the link.
Sorry about that, John. Go ahead.
Okay, can I? Okay, let me say, this is important legislation. I'd be shocked if anybody of the 4 of us had a different opinion other than we've got to do whatever we can to ban ghost guns. I've been involved in an effort. I stood with Senator Frost, Susan Lee the other day when we announced this particular ban, testified at the initial press conference. I'm testifying in the Senate Wednesday this week. I was in support of this bill last year. The numbers are going in the wrong direction. The really terrifying thing is the number of times that we've seen ghost guns that have shown up on school property. I think we're at 6 now in this school year. Kids can buy them, kids can build them, and we now know, terrifyingly after Magruder, kids can use them. In terms of whether or not we need the SROs back, let me say, I was the only one of the candidates here. I went to the meeting of the school board the other day when they were discussing school safety. I sat and listened to the testimony of all the parents and of the kids that particular day. I think we need to listen to the parents and listen to the committee on these particular issues. I don't think we paid attention initially when we made this decision. There was a vote among the 26 principals in Montgomery County. Every principal unanimously wanted the SROs to stay. We've had 1,700 calls for service to Montgomery County schools since the beginning of this school year. I think we need to open up a conversation. I heard our new historic head of the school board, new superintendent, talked about
15 seconds, John.
Okay, thank you.
You have 15 seconds. Please finish.
I'm sorry. Let me see. I think that when we went back to school this year, we had 2 things in play that we didn't have when this decision was made. Number one, we had the ripple effects of COVID, and we now have ghost guns, and they are in our schools and kids have access to them. We have to have a conversation. We put these officers in place originally because of public sentiment. We listened to the community. I think this is a community issue, but the community needs to decide this issue, not politics.
Okay, next person, Bernice.
Thank you. So regarding ghost guns, when I first heard about ghost guns and the effort of Delegate Leslie Lopez in trying to ban the ghost guns, right before I started thinking about running for this office, I was appalled on how easy it is to make and why it wasn't easy to ban and why it took 5 years. I have talked to several elected officials over the last year or so, especially during this pandemic, warning people like, look, it's going to get more violence because we're dealing with the effects of a pandemic. We're dealing with desperation in an affluent Montgomery County. That's not making sense for a lot of people. So people are not acting the way they normally act pre-pandemic, right? And things like banning ghost guns should have been at the top of the list priorities. And it wasn't. It wasn't passed this last session, and hopefully we pass now. I still with Moms on Demand, demanding for a change for ban ghost guns just several weeks ago. So I do stand with the community and making sure that ghost guns are banned. Regarding solutions to end the violence, I have actually did a talk with Delegate Leslie Lopez on gun violence, and simply it comes down to dealing with the root causes. Having a system in place, whether it's a violence interrupter program or implementing more social workers to ensure that we deal with the root cause of the issue, as well as making sure that we enforce the laws that keep communities safe. You can do both. And working with at the federal level, state and county level to make sure resources are in place to provide the social workers and the counselors that we need. The complaint is that a lot of these school counselors, I'm sorry, I'm jumping into SROs, but specifically with children, counseling and social work for youth is very difficult to get into. People don't want that stress. But what could happen is possibly at the federal level, creating a program where there's an incentive for people to get into that field so we can have the mental health counselors that the youth is looking for.
15 seconds, Denise.
Yes, and not cops. And that's why returning SROs to the school isn't the way we should be moving forward. I'm a product of Montgomery County Public Schools. I graduated the year Columbine shooting occurred. I was a college student during 9/11. I understand the fear of violence as a student, as a child. But I too believe that we need to focus on the mental health of our kids and not criminalizing our youth. Thank you.
Okay, the next question, and we are going to use order number 2. So Bernice, you will start. What is your plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the state's attorney's office?
Sorry, technical difficulties there. I apologize. Can you say the question again? I was trying to just.
What is your plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the state's attorney's office?
Yes, thank you for that. The answer is simple, and I can tell you the steps on how I'm going to get there. One, definitely having an eye to diversify the office reflective of the county. This county is 1/3 foreign born. We have a system in place, unfortunately, that doesn't reflect that. Having the ability to bring on people with diverse backgrounds really comes from leadership at the top and welcoming people into that environment. I can say I'm the only one on this panel that is a diversity hire. When I was hired at Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office, I was one of 2 African-American females. I happened to replace the one before me. So I know what it takes to keep people on. I know what it takes to make people find another way to go. I definitely have mentored and counseled other attorneys that are interested in prosecutorial work because I know how difficult it is. We're dealing with a system that inherently isn't just. And we have people of color like myself that want to see fairness and want to see justice. And having prosecutors that have that mindset is very critical. So when I do enter an office and start my first 90 days, one of the things I would do is talk to every single prosecutor, every single paralegal, every single support staff, and see if they support the vision of having a diverse and inclusive workplace. I can bring people on, but the people are not gelling with folks that don't believe in the importance of that, then we're not going to have a cohesive office that's catering towards the needs of our county. And Sheldon, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I don't know if I had time or what. Okay, there you are. I'm sorry.
Okay, Perry, same question to you. What is your plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the state's attorney's office?
Unmute Perry, please.
First of all, I want to say thank you for this question. And I want to be clear. I serve as Deputy State's Attorney of the most diverse state's attorney's office in the state, period. And it's not a complicated response. It's to understand that the standard to enter my office when I'm state's attorney was going to be excellence. But the issue is I I know that excellence resides in a broad spectrum, and it doesn't reside within one particular race or gender, right, or orientation. So our office will be open for all those who meet the criteria, that have passed the bar exam and are academically eligible to join the office. If you look at our law schools, from George Mason to the schools in DC, all the way up to Baltimore, we have the most diverse candidates in the country. But that's not reflected in Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, and that's going to change. We're going to be open, and people understand. People know that are in the business which offices really give fair and equal opportunity to candidates. And you can tell when we go to the Maryland State Attorney's Office, you can tell by the way the attorneys are sitting. You can go to one office and they'll have 20 lawyers. They have one person of color, one woman, and then the rest white males. When you go to Prince George's County, you see an array of people from all over the state, all backgrounds, gender, orientations, races, and I'm going to bring that philosophy to the office. We will be open for everyone who meets the criteria. Excellence is going to be standard, but I believe excellence reaches across a broad spectrum of candidates. Thank you.
Tom DeGonia.
Thank you. The diversity, equity, inclusion is something that you have to commit to, and it has to be a commitment from leadership. The office, unfortunately, does not reflect the diversity of our community, and I'm committed to increasing that diversity and promoting people within the office to make sure that they're at the table making the decisions that are impacting the community that is being most directly impacted by our decisions. And that means that we have to affirmatively go out and recruit people. Oftentimes, you hear it said that people don't come here, they just don't come, the applicants don't apply. Well, you have to go out and find the applicants. And I'm committed to going to our HBCUs, to our Black law students, our Latina law student societies at all of our local law schools, and affirmatively recruiting attorneys to come here. I'll recruit attorneys from other jurisdictions as well to come here who live here in our community. There are other programs that we have. We've got a pipeline scholar that identifies these young stars in law school and attract them there. I'm going to participate in the Pipeline Scholars Program, an existing program to attract those diverse candidates and retain them here in Montgomery County. I was fortunate to lead the Montgomery County Bar Association in our Racial Justice Council. And that was one of the things that we worked on, not just with our lawyers, but with the bench and with our firms. And we got buy-in from the law firms, not just lip service to it, but actually putting money behind recruiting and retaining candidates who live and work here in Montgomery County. So I've got the experience to do that. And they know, people know that my office is going to be one that is going to go out, recruit, and is going to be welcome and open for people because people deserve to be prosecuted and represented by people who look and act like them and come from the same types of backgrounds and have the same experiences that they do.
John McCarthy.
You know, I think this is something that we all agree on again. Look, I think that in a diverse community like Montgomery County, you can't serve the community in the area of criminal justice and be aware of what are some of the obvious inequities without trying to reflect the community that you live in. And I think we've done that. I think that we do recruit at the historic Black colleges, and we have been doing that to try to up the numbers and get people to come here. I will tell you, the reality is that we've been blessed with that in Montgomery County. We have lots of people that want to work in Montgomery County across all ethnic and gender bases. You know, I listened a second ago, you know, in my office, 65% of the attorneys that work for me are women. The vast 75% of my teams are headed by women. You know, you talk about historical dedication to diversity and reflecting the community. The first African-American woman that ever went on the bench in Montgomery County was Carla Smith, who headed my family unit. There are two Hispanic Americans that are on the bench in Montgomery County, two males. Victor Del Pino, who's one of the younger judges over there, I gave him his first job. Last week, we had a historic moment in the appellate court where the first Asian American woman in the history of Maryland made it to the Court of Special Appeals. I hired her right out of law school. the reality is the rhetoric does not match the reality, whether you go back historically to people like Eric Johnson, DeLawrence Beard, and others, but there are dozens of young people of all stripes and communities that are in my
15
office.
seconds, John.
And we're honored to do it. And it is a challenge. And I think it should be done. And we embrace it. And we have been embracing it. And we are recruiting those populations.
Okay, next question. 90 seconds, everybody. As the state's attorney, you would be engaged in the handling of many cases each day. How many criminal trials have you personally handled in Montgomery County and include both circuit and district trials? And what is the most important case you've tried and why? And this is order 4, starting with John McCarthy.
Oh my.
And for you, John, it's just cases you personally tried.
Yeah, I think that I've tried, in terms of jury trials, I don't think there's anybody alive in Montgomery County that's tried more than me.
So how many do you think?
Several hundred, and it's 250 major trials. Look, I was involved with the DC snipers. I was involved with Lawrence Horn and James, the Lawrence Horn, who hired a hitman to murder his family. I was involved in the golf murders. I was involved in the Samuel Scheinbein matters. I was involved in the Lululemon murders. I was involved in the first murder case in the history of Montgomery County that used DNA evidence. I was involved in the first murder conviction in Montgomery County where there was no body in the case. I have, in terms of literally, if you go back to the years that I was in district court, it's thousands. It's literally thousands. And this is what's really important about this. When young people that you hire come in and ask you questions about mentoring and strategy and evidence, if you don't have the experience, how do you serve as the educator in chief? I think a huge part of being the state attorney is being an educator. And you cannot educate young people, mentor young people, unless you've had the experience yourself. And no one's, and I think my experience in actually hands-on trying cases is unparalleled to
15
anyone.
seconds, John.
Okay. The next person is Bernice, and remember, how many have you personally handled in Montgomery County, including both circuit and district trials? And what's the most important case to you and why? Bernice?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier in the session this morning, I was a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County, where I prosecuted hundreds and thousands of cases in district court, juvenile, and circuit court. My road into working in Montgomery County began after I was hired by the law office of Eileen Oliver, who's now a district court judge, where I had my first opportunity to practice in Montgomery County, even though I lived in Montgomery County the entire time I was in Arundel. In terms of the number of cases I did mostly family, but whenever I did have an opportunity to work in Montgomery County for criminal cases, actually that was fewer. That just happens to be the lot that I was given as a private practitioner. But when I became my own solo practitioner, I sought opportunities to work in Montgomery County. And this goes to a larger issue of, unfortunately, I hate using this phrase because I don't think it's fully complete, but an good old boys network in terms of who you know. That's something that a lot of people don't talk about in public. And I hate to bring that up because you want the justice system to have an image where everyone has an equal opportunity to fight for justice in the county they live in. And that necessarily hasn't been the case. The cases I have had in Montgomery County, most of them have been pleas, but most of them have been dealing with
15 seconds.
men, yes, who have been prosecuted, which goes to a larger issue of how there's disproportionate impact of Black and brown people in the system. Leadership is what matters, as well as experience, and I have both. You need a different lens on how we're dealing with the circuit court cases, juvenile and district court cases. And that's why experience matters, but so does leadership. And that's what I have.
Okay, we are now going on to the next question. And this is an individual question. Each of you will get.
I'm sorry, Susan, or Perry and I going to get to answer that question as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
I think Mr. Paler is next on that one.
Yes, that's correct.
right. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Okay, yeah, particularly my time as a line prosecutor spent in a neighboring county, but I can tell you I handled thousands of cases, both at the district court, juvenile, and circuit court level. As a defense attorney, I tried cases throughout the state, the federal court, and the District of Columbia. Two of the most significant cases in my career prior to 9/11, I had the largest terrorism case on the East Coast. It was a juvenile matter, so we did get some media attention to the extent I can discuss it, but it was extremely large, and you can research the archives in NBC4. So it was the largest terrorism case prior to 9/11. Also, I had the opportunity to be involved in a matter where I've sued Prince George's County Police in connection with the killing of a gentleman in the midst of a mental health crisis. That's when I first.
Gary, what I asked was trials in Montgomery County, and what is the most important one? How many trials and what's the most important one?
Well, in Montgomery County, probably the most important one, I did have a family matter where there was a youth involved in a custody issue, a protective order issue with both parents. I was successful in that matter. The bulk of my career has been spent in neighboring jurisdictions, particularly in Prince George's County, where quite honestly, I had the opportunity to work. But like
15 seconds.
I have tried cases throughout the state and in the federal courts and the District of Columbia. As I mentioned, there was a matter where I sued police in connection with the killing of a gentleman in the midst of a mental health crisis. And that was probably the most significant case of my career. Also, several homicides. Sadly, one that sticks out is a homicide connected with domestic violence and
That's time.
for hire that I prosecuted. Thank you.
Tom, same question.
Thank you. I've tried cases all around the state as a defense attorney and in private practice. However, I appear in district court in Montgomery County and in circuit court in Montgomery County on an almost daily basis. I've handled thousands of criminal cases, both as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney in district court, probably thousands in circuit court as well. Tried over 75 jury trial cases, both as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney in Montgomery County and around the state. And one of the cases that stands out the most to me in my mind and really drives my decision-making is a case that I actually lost as a prosecutor. A young mother of 3 was in court for the second time, and her husband had sent her to the hospital with a broken arm. And she told me that she couldn't testify. She wouldn't testify against him. And I said, he's going to kill you the next time if we don't do something. She took the stand. She said it was an accident. And the jury said, well, we know he did it, but there just wasn't enough evidence because she wouldn't testify against him, despite the doctors and the nurses and the police officers' testimony. The next morning I came into the office, I was feeling pretty low about myself, and I'd asked the sheriffs to do a welfare check in the interim to make sure that she was okay. And there she sat, her 3 sons in tow and all of her bags packed. And she said to me, I heard what you said yesterday and I
15
want
seconds.
out. That is probably the most important case to me. And it drives my decision that every decision you as a prosecutor make impact individuals and their lives. I'm confident that I saved 4 lives that day because she heard what I said in that case. That's probably the most important case to me.
Okay, now we're going on to an individual case. Questions from information I've received. Tom, the first one is for you. You've defended murderers, rapists, and others. Why should you be chosen the next state's attorney with such a record?
Susan, is this 90 seconds also?
No, it's 60 seconds.
Okay.
If anything, I think that makes me more qualified to be a better state's attorney because I have no problem defending people, defending their actions, because that's what we're entitled to. We live in a community that's based on law, that is rooted in the Constitution and individual freedoms and rights. There are obligations. It's a constitutional right to have representation. John Adams defended the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre, so we would have the right to have a defense. Defending people doesn't make you a bad person. You're not explaining the actions. What it does is it gives you appreciation that every person who comes into contact with the criminal justice system is an individual human being. And we can never forget that we are making decisions for human beings. We're not making decisions based on categories. We're not making decisions based on race. We're making decisions that irrevocably sometimes impact human beings and their lives. That's why it's critical. I have absolutely no problem defending the Constitution, and I think we have an even greater authority and even greater responsibility as prosecutors to assure the rights of individuals.
Okay, John McCarthy, 60 seconds. After serving 4 terms, 16 years as state's attorney and 8 years prior as the deputy under Doug Gansler, do you still have the passion and energy to keep adapting to the changing circumstances in Montgomery County?
The answer to that is yes. That was actually, I appreciate that question because that's precisely the question I asked myself. I think the need for the experience that I have, this is probably the single most challenging time in the area of criminal justice during my entire time in the state's attorney's office that goes back for decades. I do not think that you can make change unless you have been able to implement change in lots of other ways, like creating a mental health court, like creating a homeless docket in Silver Spring, like making executive decisions like not prosecuting the simple possession of marijuana, like making the executive decision that when it comes to use of force cases resulting in death, we should follow the recommendation of the Obama task force on policing in the 21st century and get an independent set of eyes on it so that people
15 seconds.
think that the system is fair and transparent. That is the watchword. Fairness and transparency is the watchword of everything we're doing. That's why we hired PPI to do a study that will be published without editorial control by me.
Okay, Bernice, your next 60 seconds. Concern has been raised about your lack of experience as a trial attorney and your ability to be the state's attorney. What experiences do you have that those voters should know about to allay their concerns about your inexperience?
Well, I would argue that inexperience is not who I am. As mentioned earlier, I clerked for 2 different judges in DC Superior Court where I saw a plethora of trial attorneys do amazing work. And that's where I really learned my roots and how to prosecute cases. My first judge was a public defender, former public defender. My second judge was a prosecutor. So I was able to look at the justice system more fairly by having experiences from both of those individuals. Now, regarding my ability to be in office, I have gained a lot of leadership experience since I've been a prosecutor. Not only did I chair a 79-person task force with the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, but I also led a Silver Spring Citizens Advisory Board for 2 years. I was a member for almost 6 years, where we had the most diverse group of individuals
15 seconds.
Reflective of the county. My experience alone on paper might seem like it's not enough, but that's why it's important to listen to everybody and listen to our visions. I think vision is on the ballot right now, not the experience. If it was experience alone, then there would be different ballgame. But that's not why we're running for office and why I'm not running. Why I am running is for the vision, not for experience. And I think that's what the county is looking for.
Thank you, Perry. You've had a long career in the Prince George's State's Attorney's Office and have the endorsement of multiple people from Prince George's County. Why should Montgomery County voters select you when you are perhaps more knowledgeable, better known, and more experienced to be the state's attorney in Prince George's County?
Well, the first reason is this is my home. I have lived here and I'm a son of Montgomery County. My parents brought me here in 1974. And look, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You have 4 candidates. 2 of us were raised here. 2 of us graduated from Montgomery County schools, but yet there are 2 of us on this panel that had to go outside of the county to get employment, both completely qualified, right? That's because the doors to that office have not traditionally been open in large numbers to persons of color. I mean, that's a fact, okay? Look at the panel. We were raised here, but we had to go elsewhere. And so, like I said in the beginning, that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who remain neutral during a time of moral crisis. We are in a moral crisis now, friends, and I know I can bring the leadership.
15 seconds.
I bring the leadership and I bring the passion for people that are raised in Montgomery County to have a fair opportunity to join this office and make the office really reflect Montgomery County. I have the leadership ability, I have the executive experience, and I have the passion
Time.
to open the door for all persons.
Okay, the next question, we're going to use order number 2. And Perry, you will be first. Juvenile justice reform questions were asked by many to include Maryland SB 165 that would end automatic referral of juveniles to adult court, diversionary efforts such as drug court, mental health court, and expunging or sealing records for youth are in the current mix of efforts. What is your plan to improve and reform juvenile justice and disparity in Montgomery County?
What is the
So I
time
think-
limit, Susan?
What row are we
I
on?
think Bernice is first on number 2.
Yeah.
Susan.
Oh,
What is the time limit, Susan?
2 minutes, Bernice.
Okay, and forgive me, can you repeat the question again? I apologize. I'll make sure I get it right.
I can't repeat it all. It has to do with juvenile justice.
Just the last
reform.
question. Just the
One.
last question.
What is your plan to improve and reform juvenile justice and disparity in Montgomery County?
Yes, thank you. That is one of the reasons why I'm running. As I mentioned before, we are dealing with a crisis among our youth. The disproportionate treatment of Black and Brown students in Montgomery County is alarming. And truancy court and status quo isn't sufficient. So it's about bringing on more resources that deal with restorative justice measures and keeping it as much outside of the system as possible. I think even with truancy court and other treatment courts, you're still introducing the student to the system and you're still stigmatizing them. There needs to be a greater partnership with the school system on dealing with restorative justice. They being the school system have that as a platform, but it's not matched with the fact that young 15, 16-year-olds are still, getting charged as adults as the law is currently in place. But having a prosecutor that can go down to Annapolis and fight for changes, like increasing the age to prosecute as an adult, things like that, forward-thinking ideas instead of reactive ideas is another tool to change how we're doing juvenile justice in Montgomery County.
Perry?
Yeah, couple things. A couple things. One, I would expand diversion programs within the juvenile justice program in the state attorney's office. And also I will coordinate with DJS. I would want to know, we want to have somebody that's time down working with DJS to determine when a J1 is filed, who gets formal treatment and who gets the informal treatment. That's the gatekeeper. We need to know at what rate certain populations are diverted to informal treatment and know who is actually referred to the state's attorney for prosecution. I think that's the key to determine what offenses, who, and particularly which geographic area, and for what types of offenses are certain persons being referred. In terms of the legislation that you raised, I missed the bill number. I think you said 165, but I would definitely be in favor of a further study to examine that bill. I believe one of them is everyone who's charged under 18 starts out in juvenile court. And what I'd say with that is, look, I always say A, B, C, D, right? Adolescent brain cognitive disorder. We know that now we know more about the brain function, that we have a responsibility to keep our youth in youth court, and treatment should be our first option. To the extent that we need to have young people charged as adults, it should not be our first, second, or third option. We should always defer to treatment and keep our juveniles in juvenile court as long as possible.
Okay, next we have Tom.
Our juvenile justice system in Montgomery County over the last 6 years, 70% of the children who were involved in juvenile justice were children of color. 88% were children of color, and 99% of the kids who were ultimately charged as adults were children of color. we have a vastly disproportionate impact on our children of color. And we have to think about children first. Juvenile justice is about rehabilitation and about restorative justice. We don't have a meaningful restorative justice program. I would pilot a restorative justice program in our juvenile courts. That's when kids are the most receptive to it. That's shown, the data has shown they're going to be most effective for restorative justice programs in our juvenile justice system. We have to divert more kids from getting them into the system from the beginning. There are no numbers, and I haven't seen any place where there are numbers where it shows you who's represented at an initial intake meeting with a lawyer, the diversionary cases that go out of the system at that point, versus someone who doesn't show up with a lawyer at a diversionary meeting and their child gets put into the system. The Department of Juvenile Services is the primary responder for providing services to children. If they come into court and say this child doesn't need services or is no longer in need of services, and you hear that a lot, it's the responsibility of the state's attorney's office to go out into our community. We have nonprofits, we have programs to find and connect that child with the resources in that child's family, so that child doesn't just sit in the juvenile justice system waiting to graduate and become an adult offender, because that's what happens. 80% of the people who are charged in adult court later on
15
had a
seconds.
prior contact in the juvenile justice system. And that's where we're going to make the biggest impact to bending that school to prison pipeline, keeping those kids out of there.
John McCarthy.
You know, I think this is an area where I think the public needs to be greater educated about how the law, what the law says now. There are certain children who are charged with crime. They're under the age of 18, but they might be as young as 14 or 15. Maryland law says they shall be charged as adults if they commit an offense that carries life imprisonment. There's a laundry list of other children who have to be charged as adults by law. If they're on this laundry list, there's no discretion for the state's attorney. The first thing that has to happen here is, and I support this, the legislature needs to take action. For a simple example, when you're 14 and 15, there should never be a presumption that you start as an adult. The child, if the state wants to move them up, they should let them file a waiver, let the burden be on them. But the first thing that needs to change is the law. The state's attorney doesn't get to dictate the law. You have to follow it, and that begins at the legislature. Number two, look, one of the things that I think is a key thing, I've actually seen myself as a state's attorney, but an educator as much as anything else. And I will say to you that one of the things that we do that prevents involvement in crime by young people is going to school. We have the truancy prevention program. This is not a lock them up thing. This is an education thing where we challenge young kids that are in school that are not going regularly to go back to school. 90% of the kids we serve who have been identified by the school system are Black or brown kids. This is not a lock them up. This is a success story thing. We've been doing it for years. I started it. Choose respect. We want to reduce. We don't want to lock kids up. We want to teach them to choose respect in dating relationships. We know statistically
15 seconds.
In teen dating relationships, 1 in 3 have violence. Education is the key to children becoming involved. We have a number of educational programs designed totally to keep kids out of the system.
That's time.
That's going to be the benchmark of what we do here in Montgomery County, educate and prevention.
Okay, the next question is a change because of input this morning. It's 90 seconds and we're going to follow order number 1. Much has been noted of late regarding an increase in crime in Silver Spring. What are your plans to address this issue? 90 seconds. Tom DeGonia, please start.
That's a great question, and it's one that I wrote about on Bethesda Beat. Simply flooding the area with more police officers and prosecuting more people is not the answer. I've met with business owners. I toured downtown Silver Spring. I looked at the bullet holes in the shop windows, and I talked to business owners. I've also talked to people who've been arrested for relatively minor offenses in downtown Silver Spring. This is a problem that we have to solve together, and it requires engagement and involvement. It's not as if you can build something and then just let it go. You can't leave the garden untended. And that's what's happened. And that comes from a lack of engagement and involvement. We have to meet with our stakeholders, our business owners, the community, and the police and set better priorities. Where it's about targeted enforcement and thinking strategically and how we address those problems. It's about keeping guns out of the hands of the people who are committing those gun crimes. And it's about working with the community to make sure that we are enforcing the right laws. It's about talking about what's going on at the society club. And should we regulate the alcohol distribution there? Should we regulate other operating hours? Getting to the root of that problem. It's not about somebody smoking a joint on the corner. It is about quality of life issues, but you have to think strategically about that. And that's some place where that has been sorely lacking. I see that there were 2 prosecutors who were assigned. Under community-based prosecution, you'd have a full-time prosecutor assigned to that.
15 seconds.
Working with everyone in that, from the communities to the faith-based to the police and the business owners, to set better priorities and better enforcement. You got to solve the root problem. You can't just sit back and wait for cases to come in.
John McCarthy.
Let me say, I do think the first thing you need to do is to listen to the community. And I have been. I was at a forum where the community met a few months ago, and about 100 key community leaders and people from the business community met. And they had some suggestions about what they wanted. And they're terrified. Look, I began teaching at Montgomery College in 1979. I know what it used to look like when you drove through Silver Spring. I saw the rebuilding, the rejuvenation, and we need to protect that investment that this community has made. But we need partnership. We need partnership. This is not just about locking people up. Look, do we have a role in prosecuting people that bring violence to Silver Spring? Answer, yes. Do we have a role in prosecuting people that bring guns or drugs to Silver Spring? Yes. But we also have to look at other options. One of the things that I know is going on, because I've been part of the conversation, is we know that disproportionately a lot of this violence is occurring between midnight and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. There have been some celebrated stories about some of those incidences. We are now, along with county officials, we're doing checking on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. We're going down into the community, looking for code violations, trying to find out what's happening, what's driving people into Silver Spring as
15 seconds
to hang out in the middle of the night, sometimes under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and in many instances, it's led to violence. But we're trying to do it through code enforcement. Look, you can't put the answers for these questions on bumper stickers. These are intelligent, broad-based conversations that do not come down to bumper sticker answers.
Bernice.
Thank you for this question. As what I did not mention earlier today is that I am a product of downtown Silver Spring. That's where I grew up. That's where I went to City Place Mall. So the crime increase in downtown Silver Spring is terrifying to me. But folks, we've been here before. Almost 10 years ago, when I was serving on the Silver Spring Citizens Advisory Board, we had an increase in youth crime, and youth curfew was on the table. And I worked with stakeholders through nonprofits, youth agencies. I believe at one point, there was someone, the principals, the attorney's office, we all tried to come up with solutions. And the solution was not criminalizing our youth, but actually providing programs and incentives like positive youth development programs. As I mentioned earlier, being from Silver Spring, there was a time where I grew up in Summit Hills, there was drug trafficking going on. So I definitely am sensitive to the increase of crime in Silver Spring, but we've been here before. And the answer isn't just to focus on over-policing or criminalizing, although it's important because we want to keep our neighborhood safe, but also in conjunction, have partnerships with our nonprofits and other organizations to create the programs necessary, whether it's a violence interrupter program, similar in tangentially to possibly the red shirts in downtown Silver Spring, creating a program like that, something I've considered, but the partnerships are key. So it's not just being in the room of conversations,
15 seconds.
But having ideas to provide a different vision on how to keep us safe and making sure that we're all treated with respect and dignity, especially the business owners, especially the residents of downtown Silver Spring.
Okay, Perry.
Yeah, I have a friend I grew up with. She's a partner at a law firm. She graduated from Springbrook High School. She has a condominium right behind LA Fitness, and she's had bullets shot into her condo twice. Okay, and I have walked Silver Spring, and I've been down there with the Silver Spring Safety Group. They contacted me, so I have walked the community, and it's an issue. One of the things that we currently do now, where I sit as deputy, is we have a community outreach program that it involves Board of Education, park and planning, violence interrupters, and these are people that have had different levels of involvement with the criminal justice system, returning citizens, and also community leaders. And we engage. We throw events in terms of cookouts, that we get bands and DJs. We throw events. What we know has happened, particularly through COVID, is we have had a real lack of supervised activities for our young people. So we have felt it was important to engage, and people need continuous engagement, but also we do it in a manner that we bring all partners together. A lot of people talk about what they want to do. I can tell you what I'm actually doing. We bring these partners together. We go into the communities. We've been as far north as Calverton, but throughout the county where I work, throughout Prince George's County, we've been well received. And that's something I will replicate here in Montgomery
15
County.
seconds.
We will bring the Board of Education, Park and Planning, and police. And that's, it's the engagement, but it's also developing trust. So when young people, it's amazing, I'm saying, it starts out, the cookout, police are on one side, young people on the other. By the end of the afternoon, by the end of the evening, people kind of come close together, they're communicating.
That's time.
And they're building
Okay,
bridges. And that's what I want to
next
do.
question, 60 seconds. We're going to use order number 4, starting with John McCarthy. Gangs in Montgomery County exist in every racial group and appear to be a growing problem. What will you do to address gangs if chosen to be the next state's attorney?
I do not necessarily accept the last part of your question as accurate. Look, we clearly have gangs in Montgomery County, and clearly they are involved in some instances in violent crime. I do not believe that necessarily we have seen an uptick in the number of gang members or the number of gang activities. We do have gang activities, and we have gang activities throughout this community. And as you said, they represent a complete cross section of the people living in this community. I think that what we again try to do is you try to work with some community partners. You try to reach out to people like Identity. You try to reach out to the Street Outreach Network and go to their Summer of Peace activities. Last summer,
15 seconds.
when Montgomery County had a strategy for doing outreach throughout this community, I went to every single Street Outreach and networking event to meet the people in the community week after week, talking to them about how to reduce youth violence and particularly gang violence in their community.
That's
Go
time.
out, meet, and talk to people in the community. I did that.
Bernice.
One of the ways we deal with gang violence is really focused on restorative justice. I think that's the new vision that we're looking for in Montgomery County. Oftentimes when people get involved in gangs, they don't have the resources to support at home in their own surroundings to thrive, and they feel that the gang is a way to thrive, a way to feel important, a way to feel heard. Having more opportunities with the community stakeholders and like Identity and Safe Streets summer program that the incumbent had mentioned. Those are the programs that not only need to be partnered with, but expanded to a variety of diverse communities. And that's really what it comes down to. The gang activity occurs when there's no one in that group that's being heard by the system, by the community.
15 seconds.
In these programs to African communities or other Asian communities that feel neglected and feel inclined to get into the involved in that program, that's what we need. But we need a leadership up top that understands those diverse, complicated situations of those communities in order to curb gang violence.
Perry.
Yeah, couple things. One, obviously you have a unit dedicated to handling gang offenses in the state's attorney's office. But the main thing is to develop intelligence from working with your partners, not only the law enforcement partners, but like I said, the Board of Education, our educators, and you want to identify, but also once people are involved in the criminal justice system, I want to offer diversion programs. Like one big program I run is Back on Track program. Once people are engaged in the in the program, you have an opportunity to plead guilty, but upon performing 280 hours of community service, and also you're offered the opportunity to complete your education, whether it's GED, certificate, or an associate's. We offer the opportunity to complete your education, paid for through the program, and we connect you with a job.
15 seconds.
So based on that, people want opportunity. And one of the reasons I put in my bio that I have a history with economic development, I know economic development and opportunity is the greatest tool to fight crime. And it's my job as state's attorney to provide a workforce that's not bogged down with a bunch of convictions.
That's time.
Advantage of economic opportunities here in the county.
Tom.
First of all, you have to understand why people get involved in gangs. They get involved in gangs because they don't have a sense of belonging in another organization. They don't have the family support. They don't have positive peer support. And so you have to understand that that context of why do people turn to gangs. And to combat gangs, you have really 3 points. You've got prevention, intervention, and suppression. And that prevention comes through the schools. It comes through active engagement. It comes from having young men mostly and young women have the opportunities to positively engage and connect. That comes through our churches. It comes through our schools. It comes through, quite frankly, our Department of Recs, where Gabe Albornoz was the head of that, partnered with us at the Family Justice Center to make sure we were connecting kids to positive programs. And it also comes through intervention. The Street Outreach Network is a great program.
15 seconds.
As Tony Hauser pointed out, and it needs to expand. Those are people who were in gangs. We need intervention in order to get them out, to keep them out, tattoo removal, and if necessary, suppression. That is, we have to enforce and sometimes potentially incarcerate someone who's involved in vicious and violent gangs.
Okay. This is the last question before closing statements, and it's 90 seconds. We're going to use order number 3. We've talked about school resource officers, gangs, juvenile justice disparity, and reform. Traffic enforcement is another often addressed issue. Should traffic enforcement be taken away from the Montgomery County Police Department and moved to the Montgomery County Department of Transportation? Please include your thoughts on racial disparity in arrests, charging, and prosecution patterns overall in Montgomery County. And again, we will start with Perry.
Well, in terms of whether or not we should move traffic enforcement, I don't believe so, but that will be a decision for the county executive and the police chief. But I do believe that in terms of racial disparity, that we should make sure that that data is kept, it should be tracked, and it should be made public. But, in terms of being the state's attorney, it will be incumbent on me to provide leadership as it relates to traffic enforcement. And we got to be forward thinking. Right now, there are 14 bills for the legalization of recreational marijuana. So I have to know what impact is that going to have on our DUI, DWI cases, driving while impaired, and whether or not our police department is equipped and has the funding for the appropriate number of DREs, drug recognition experts. We know that our pedestrians, we've had a extremely high level of pedestrian deaths. So we need to make sure that not only are we using police, one of the things I'm going to have is a director of policy planning and legislation, and where I'm going to want to make sure that when development plans are in place, that they're from the state's attorney's perspective, we make sure that we have walkable communities, but that they're safe. We have sidewalks, we have things like roundabouts and speed bumps to make sure that our pedestrians are safe.
15 seconds.
And lastly, we've seen an uptick with technology. We have self-automated cars where we have to be leaders in terms of making sure our drivers and pedestrians are safe when people are getting in these Teslas that are self-automated.
That's time.
Tom.
I think the suggestion is not that we're taking in the enforcement of DWIs and auto manslaughters and those types of things. Those are things that there always is going to have to be a need for police to be available, to investigate, to enforce those. And I think the statistics have shown that enforcing DUIs and DWIs and driving under the influence of other intoxicants is always going to remain with the police. I think what we're talking about is expanding the use of automated systems for speed cameras, for red light cameras, for suppression. There certainly is a role for better engineering, and I think a lot of public education. But I think there's always going to be a need to have police officers on the street enforcing DWI, DRE laws. I think what we're talking about, and this is a role for the state's attorney, is to review those traffic stops. Were those traffic stops that were based on probable cause, and do they pass constitutional muster? When my prosecutors are out in the stations and they're working with and training the officers, they're going to be able to notice those trends and say, listen, this officer's got some issues and he needs to do better. Or this officer's doing a great job and she is the model that you should be
15
following
seconds.
for how you enforce those cases. There is a role for expanded automation, but there's always going to be a need for police officers on the street.
John.
Unmute, please, John.
John, you've got to unmute.
I think this is another example of a question that when you first hear it, it sounds like, there could be a relatively simple answer to it. And quite candidly, even as you sit here and you listen to it, you realize that these things are complex. Minor infractions, which I think that where we can monitor it with red light cameras or speed cameras, that's great because it saves lives. And I think we should try to do that. I do think that there is a cost if you don't. Look, there's certain areas, and I think maybe Tom said this, maybe even Perry, that there's going to be certain kinds of cases you have to have the police involved in doing the stops. The drunk driving stops, the reckless driving, the hit and runs, the auto fatalities, the police are going to be involved. Where do you draw those lines? I'd also say that, I am concerned about things like pretext stops. The pretext stops are where police officers stop you for a reason that's really not the reason that they're stopping you. They're stopping you because you don't come to a complete stop at a stop sign, but they're checking for drugs or guns. One of the things that will happen, if you talk to the police, you're going to find out, I saw this in the chat, if you take police out of making traffic stops, you probably will have a reduction in the number of guns that get taken off the street. I know some people are talking about wanting to be
15
tougher on
seconds.
guns. I want to be tougher on guns. But this is, again, a complex issue that would, in order to intelligently do this, is a much larger conversation, and you can't do it in an hour, in a minute.
Bernice.
Yes, thank you for that question. As a co-chair of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, traffic enforcement is one of the issues we dealt head on, and I invite you to look at our 87 recommendations, among them dealing with traffic enforcement. And I had been on record saying that that was really a starting point for the conversation. Because I agree that it's a complicated issue. As a prosecutor, you just want to make sure that you get enough pieces of evidence to make sure you put on a strong case and make sure that the laws are being abided by in order to have evidence that's going to stand up in court. And whether it's through the police, the DOT is really an area where it should focus on the work of the county council, county executive. A prosecutor just needs that information in order to make sure that we prosecute these cases in a fair and equitable manner. What is within our purview as prosecutors, making sure we have a vision on how to tackle racial bias in the way we prosecute cases. There is a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people being stopped by the police across the county, and that needs to be at the forefront of every every traffic case that we do. In addition, there's been definitely a more important need to focus on traffic-related deaths, particularly pedestrian-related deaths. I was just at a memorial on
15 seconds.
For one of the pedestrians killed in Silver Spring, and we need to be more creative as to what charges are being filed in those circumstances. Even if there's the deceased is at fault, what tools can we put in place to make sure that people are held accountable for the actions of keeping of harming pedestrians on the street and killing them?
Okay, before we go into closing statements, I want to thank our 4 guests, and I ask each of our 4 guests to email me your contact information for the campaign and email address, phone number, whatever, so that I can include it with the tape for this meeting so that people can follow up. This has been very informational. We have never had this many guests on a Zoom session before. And I think that people are concerned, and we do love justice in the District 18 Breakfast Club. So thank you again. Now with closing statements, they are 3 minutes long. Of course, if you are done sooner, you can quit at any time. So we'll start with John McCarthy.
Being the state's attorney for Montgomery County and the work in this office has actually been my life's work. I never came to this job as an ambitious politician to move my way up the ladder. It was a continuation of many years of service to this community as a line prosecutor, where I headed every office I headed every unit in the office before I became state's attorney, every single one. I've tried to hire the best and the brightest, train them, mentor them, to make sure that the people that represent you when you're the victim of crime, you have the best possible people to represent you. I think we've done that. During the time I've been in the state's attorney's office, 35 men and women have been made judges, 3 in the last month. Public service is a family tradition in my family. It started with my grandfather, it went to my dad, and it's throughout my entire family. I think this is a calling. It's a profession. To me, it's not politics. It's a profession. It's a dedication. Look, I'm proud of the fact, pre-COVID, during the first 14 years I was state's attorney, crime dropped 29.6% in Montgomery County when I was working with partners like Ike Leggett. The jail population, when the day I became state's attorney, was 906 on an average day. It fell to close to 600. COVID has driven those numbers back up a little bit because people are waiting to get to trial. There's more to be done. I'm honored to have people like, and their names have been mentioned today, Gabe Albernas, Susan Lee, Ike Leggett, Will Smith, the Attorney General for the state of Maryland, Brian Frosch, among my dozens of supporters for this job. And they are supporting me because they've worked with me. They know me. And they know me for a very long time through some tough times and some tough challenges. One of the things that I look forward to doing, and we are doing this, I think that there are some questions being asked in the area of criminal justice that are new questions, and they're important questions, and they're important questions for us to be transparent. That's why I became the first prosecutor in the state of Maryland to hire an outside agency to come in and to look at every aspect of how we operate to determine whether or not there is any bias on ethnic or racial lines in anything that we do in the state's attorney's office. There will be a study that will be published. I have no editorial control over it. And we're putting up
15 seconds.
We're putting up a dashboard so that into perpetuity, if you want to know what's going on in the state's attorney's office, you'll be able to know it. The committee deserves to know it. And I've taken the leadership role to try to make sure that the community has the answers and the information they deserve. Thank you very much. Thank you for the sponsors in this particular event. It was an honor to be with my fellow
That's
candidates.
time.
Thank you.
Bernice.
Thank you all again for coming in. Yes, I am amazed at the over 80 of you still signed on after 90 minutes. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. As I mentioned earlier, justice is on the ballot. A new vision of justice is on the ballot. The fact that by definition, I am the youngest one on here. I have the most to explore in terms of creativity. When I was a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County, I knew right away the system didn't work for everyone. So I went to private practice to see how I can make a difference there in the area of family law, as well as criminal defense work. But we're at a time in our country where we're willing to do a reset. We're willing to look at our vision of justice, check out our prescription to make sure it's in line with the values and the populations that we are serving in Montgomery County. And that time is now. If George Floyd did not do that, then the recent police-related deaths in Montgomery County did. We need a new vision of justice that focuses on seeking great transparency and accountability, not just when it's election season, but ongoing striving for that transparency so trust can be increased in the criminal justice system, because that's really what the issue is. There's a lack of trust in the system, and that's why there's such a desire for transparency tools. We need a system that focuses on terms of incarceration to tackle mass incarceration and not be afraid to say that as the county prosecutor. You can still keep people safe and not criminalize unnecessarily. And that's the kind of vision that we need for our county. We also need a justice system that focuses on equity and fairness in who gets invited to these diversion programs, who gets the opportunity to have treatment courts. That needs to be a clear criteria. And in my experience in Anne Arundel County, I can provide that. And that's not currently the case in the status quo. We need a justice system that focuses on restoring communities and not just the fact that someone doesn't get prosecuted, but how are we keeping communities whole with dealing with victims' needs? As diverse as county is, we need more resources in diversifying our victim witness unit to make sure they understand the sensitivities of different cultures. Those are things that I, from my personal experience, have seen growing up in Montgomery County, and I currently see now in the status quo in terms of how victims are being dealt with in this county that aren't U.S. born. There's a cry for a change in justice because we deserve it in Montgomery County. 1/3 of this county is foreign born, and that's very telling. And it's only going to get more diverse. And we need a leader in that office to understand that and making sure we are doing everything we can to make sure that every person in this county feels safe and they don't feel like they're a victim of the system that unfortunately can be inherently biased and racist. But we need someone who's not afraid to say that, folks, and still want to keep people safe. In my upbringing, I've dealt
15
with
seconds.
I've dealt with domestic violence cases. I've dealt with drug trafficking. I've dealt with all these things, and I still believe we can have a fairer justice system that keeps people safe and not perpetuate racism and mass incarceration unnecessarily. Thank you.
Perry.
All right, and I just want to thank everyone who took time out of their morning to come and listen to all the candidates this morning. I'm a son of Montgomery County, raised here. Like I said, my parents brought us here in 1974, raised my family here, and I'm proud to be a resident of Montgomery County. I think what's great is that part of this program, you can distinguish. Everyone talks about what they want to do. Now you get a chance to evaluate what are the candidates actually doing. Hands down, I'm a deputy in the most progressive state's attorney's office in the state, period, undisputed. And I can bring both safety and justice. Ms. Miracle North talked about foreign-born residents in Montgomery County. I am proud to have just received the endorsement of CASA in action. And that's why? Because they know what I'm actually doing now, what I stand for based on my past practices. On June 28th, we have an election. On June 29th, I will wake up and I will be doing criminal justice reform. The voters just get to determine what address, whether I will continue to drive 30 miles away or I get the opportunity to serve the community where I was raised. I bring the management experience. On any given day, I'm responsible for 1,000 criminal cases. I have the executive experience helping manage a budget of over $19 million, dealing with 170 full-time equivalents. What change do I want to bring? We're going to expand diversion programs. We're going to protect our seniors under attack, particularly as it relates to cyber crimes, telephone harassment, things of that nature. We're going to protect our seniors. We're going to expand diversion programs, but we're going to really push community engagement, because the office and the expectation of the state's attorney is changing. It's evolving. And there's that old saying, you can't pour new wine in old wineskins. The county has a different and a new and a revised expectation of the state's attorney. They want to see them. They want to be engaged. The delegation wants to hear from the state's attorney. We're going to have a director of policy planning and legislation. The delegation is going to know where I stand, not only and from January to April, but all year round. We'll have constant contact, constant communication. After Labor Day, we will sit down with the legislation regarding criminal justice, bills that impact criminal justice, and they will know where I stand on every issue every year. Ladies and gentlemen, I just believe I'm the best person to run this office. This is my time to lead, and I'd ask for your support for State's Attorney for Montgomery County. Thank you.
Tom DeGonia.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you to Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Paler and Ms. Mirku North for their participation and everyone who stayed on. It's very much appreciated. And I think everyone's gotten a good sense of what some of the issues are that are facing us in the future. And this is an election. We faced probably one of the greatest social reckonings that many of us have ever experienced over the last few years. And you have to look at how did we respond to that? And during that time, I was fortunate to lead the Bar Association of Montgomery County. And what did I do? We set up a racial justice council. We partnered with the American Society of Black Psychologists who came in and educated us. This wasn't a train that was just now leaving the station. The train on racial justice had left the station long ago. And to come in now and do a study is after the fact. We know there's a problem. I've been to the jails. I've seen the kids. I've represented them in court. We know there's a problem. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And who has the ability, the experience, and the vision to move us forward? And I'm that candidate. I've done that in representing and handling and directing organizations already. I've done it in the courtroom. I've done it in the courtrooms across the state. I've done it most recently here in Montgomery County. In the Family Justice Center, I chaired the Family Justice Center Foundation. We raised millions of dollars, served thousands of domestic violence survivors and their families. That was creative. And that was done here with partnerships through the bench, through the police, through our nonprofits, through community-based organizations. So I've done it. I've done it here in Montgomery County. I've advocated and actually taken action and gotten buy-in from our partners on real, meaningful reforms. Not just talking about it, not just platitudes, but actually doing it. I've gotten that job done. You heard a lot about legislation, and I know there are a lot of our legislators on here, and there are even some of our judges on here. Those are relationships that I have that we're gonna be required to rely on moving forward. Right now, in 2019, there were 683 open felony cases. At the end of 2021, there were over 1,000, almost 1,100 open felony cases. The prosecutor you're going to pick is going to be required to hit the ground running and be able to do this job from day one. And we can talk a lot about what laws are in place and what laws should be in place. But the reality is, and one of the things we haven't really talked about is the state's attorney is the chief law enforcement officer for this county. And that person sets the policies. You exercise the discretion on who does get charged and who doesn't get charged. And
15 seconds.
You have some choices, but I feel that I'm the right choice with the experience and the vision and the commitment to see it through and the relationships to actually make those changes happen as we move forward here in Montgomery County. So I hope I can earn your vote on June 28th in the primary.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Tom DeGonia, John McCarthy, Bernice North, and Perry Paler. The voters, now you've heard them. Again, I ask all the candidates to send me the contact information from your campaign, and I will include it with the tape of today's meeting. Next month, we're going to do it again with 90 minutes with our county executive candidates. I think we covered a lot of issues. I know it was far too long to go into great depth, but I think everyone here today gained a lot of insight into each of the four candidates. Thank you all very much for coming, and happy Valentine's Day, and see you on March 14th. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.